I had the one bedroom in the house that wasn't on the second floor. My parents' house was a high ranch, so when you entered, it split into two levels. One with a half flight of stairs going up and one going down. The downstairs had the den, the garage, my bedroom, and a bathroom. The other three bedrooms were upstairs. Being the oldest and only boy with two younger sisters, I got the room downstairs because it was the biggest and honestly the coolest. When I turned 10, my parents upgraded my bed. They gave my twin bed to my younger sister, and I got a full-size bed. It was a nice upgrade, especially since my room was spacious enough for it. By the time I was 12, my sisters were still very young. One was 5, the other 8. At that age, I was allowed to stay home alone, but my 5-year-old sister never was. My 8-year-old sister could stay with me, but only for short periods, like when my parents went out for just a few hours. It was during one of those nights, after my parents had been out, that I started noticing something strange. For several nights in a row, I would wake up in the middle of the night for no apparent reason and couldn't fall back asleep. Considering I was only 12, I knew this wasn't normal. It wasn't the heat. My fan was on, providing constant white noise, so I couldn't figure out what was waking me up. One night, after waking up and refilling my glass of water, I heard a noise coming from inside my room. I turned off the faucet and listened, but the house was silent. I checked the room but felt a sense of unease creeping over me. My room suddenly felt different. I decided to sleep on the couch upstairs that night, trying to shake the feeling off. But the weirdness didn't stop there. Later that same night, I woke up again, this time to noises coming from the kitchen. I saw the glow of the fridge light and heard someone rummaging through it. The way the floor plan was set up, I could see the kitchen from the living room, but I couldn't see who was there. I heard the fridge door close, then footsteps heading down the stairs. Drowsy, I went back to sleep, brushing it off. The next day, my mom mentioned how my room smelled bad. I didn't think much of it and ignored her. I couldn't smell anything. But that night, after watching a movie with my family, my dad turned on the air conditioning because it was still so hot. Everyone started getting ready for bed, and I went to my room to play video games. When I finally got tired, I turned everything off and tried to sleep. No fan on tonight. The air conditioning was doing its job, but again I woke up. I couldn't figure out what was making the noise. The air conditioning stopped, and the room fell into silence. But then, I heard something breathing, and it wasn't me. I scanned the room. The closet door was shut, so it wasn't coming from there. I assumed it was just my younger sister messing with me, so I crouched down to look under my bed. When I lifted the cloth hanging at the bottom of my bed, my heart froze. There was a large person lying under my bed, their head turned toward me, eyes closed. I screamed and scrambled out of the room. My parents rushed in, hearing my cries. I pointed to my room and shouted, "Under the bed!" My dad rushed in, pulling out this dirty, large man. He physically dragged him outside while my mom called 911. I think he ended up in jail, but who knows? He was probably homeless. That experience left me shaken for years. I couldn't sleep in my own room anymore and had to sleep between my parents for weeks. My dad installed security cameras around the house, and we threw away everything in the fridge because we had no idea what that man had touched. The fear of someone hiding under my bed haunted me for a long time, and we still don't know how long he was there. This next story comes from my great-grandfather, who's 101 now. He's told this story at family gatherings for years. He was born in Yaroslavl, Russia, back when it was still the Soviet Union. He served under the USSR during World War II and fled to the US after the war to escape communism. He told me this story recently, not long after the Battle of Ilikaluki. Though it wasn't a major battle, it resulted in a massive amount of bloodshed. It was a cold evening after the battle, and my great-grandfather and his comrades were celebrating their survival. Drinks were flowing, and laughter filled the air. At some point, two soldiers entered the building. My great-grandfather and his friend Sergei didn't care much for them. They were loud and unpleasant. Sergei suggested they step outside for a smoke, and my great-grandfather agreed.
They stepped into the freezing cold, lit their cigarettes, and chatted, basking in the glory of their victory. But suddenly, they heard a scream from the woods in the distance. Worried it might be one of their comrades in danger, they rushed inside, grabbed their weapons, and gathered a group of soldiers to investigate. The deeper they went into the woods, the more uneasy my great-grandfather felt. Soon, the group split into pairs to search. Sergei and my great-grandfather walked together, and as they ventured deeper, they began hearing faint cries. They followed the sound, finding drops of blood in the snow. The scene that awaited them was horrifying. Two German soldiers lay on the ground, one dead, the other barely alive. The dead soldier had been mutilated. His limbs torn off, his face skinned, and his uniform shredded. The smell was overpowering, not like a dead body, but something chemical. The surviving German soldier was cowering, muttering in German. My great-grandfather approached the dead soldier, and it was clear that this had been no ordinary battle. The sight still gives him chills to this day. As he investigated, he heard moaning, followed by a tall, dark figure running through the woods. It was fast, and my great-grandfather and Sergei began firing wildly in its direction. But it vanished into the darkness. They never investigated further. The men were reprimanded when they returned, but the report to high command went unanswered. My great-grandfather always says it was the most terrifying experience of his life. This next story is from when my fiancée Morgan and I had just moved into our new home in a quiet town. We were excited but also exhausted from the process of settling in. We met some of the neighbors, an older couple in their late 60s who were nice, but we didn't meet the neighbors next door until a few weeks later. One evening, Morgan was cooking pasta while I was shopping for rugs online. I got up to open the back door because the house felt stuffy, but when I glanced out into the backyard, I froze. There was a man sitting in one of the chairs, his head lowered. I whispered to Morgan, "Don't scream, but there's a man in the yard," she gasped, pulling me behind her. I wanted to run, but I didn't know what to do. The man was sitting with his back to us, and he looked bigger than me. Morgan suggested I yell at him to leave, but I wasn't sure if I should. But eventually, I knocked on the glass and shouted at him to leave. The man turned and smiled, a half smile almost like he was mocking me. He had a long gray beard and tattoos. He stood up and walked toward the glass door, staring at Morgan, licking his lips and saying vile things. I yelled that I was calling the police, then quickly closed the blinds. I called 911 and stayed on the phone until the police arrived. But by the time they got there, the man was gone. We thought it was over, but later that night, while watching TV, we heard something from outside. The man was back, holding a cigarette and talking to himself. When he saw me peeking through the blinds, he ran to the window, pounding on it, shouting horrible things. I told Morgan to go upstairs, and we called the police again. They arrived quickly this time, but the man had vanished again. The next day, we learned some disturbing news. The neighbors a few doors down recognized him. He had a history of violence, and the police knew about him. We reported him, but without video evidence, they couldn't press charges. We haven't seen him since, and I hope we never do again.